our Easter trip will be here in no time, so I think it's time to start ticking some jobs off on this car and getting it ready. So before I tackle anything too crazy, at New Year's, on our quick New Year's drive, the ARB compressor failed. You can still hear like the electric motor still goes, no worries, but it doesn't pump any air. And Jesse Gleason was saying that, yeah, it's like they can snap rod bolts. So I'm assuming that that's what's happened. It snapped the little rod bolt for the little piston. Cause yeah, like you flick the switch and it's going, but it doesn't pump any air. So what I've actually done is I've had a few failed ones over the years. That one's a real old one, and this one was off the race car. So I'm gonna see if I can pull the one out of my wagon and then try and make one good one out of the three. And I don't know, I'll see how reliable that is, whether I just, I don't know, buy a new one and use that one as a spare, I don't know. So I'll quickly show you how it's all set up. There is a bit going on in here. The joys of having a nice big winch on the front. But I've got the ARB compressor here, which feeds into, with this line here, feeds into this air tank. And then I've got like a King's Supercenter Thumper compressor under there, which feeds into the tank as well. So they both feed into the same tank. And the idea is if one fails, you know, the other one can back it up, which worked out really handy, but I'm gonna change something with that in a minute. But if I go and switch this on here somewhere, you can hear it goes, but no air. So that's why, yeah, after what Jesse told me, I'm assuming that that's what happened. I might actually pull that out now and pull all three apart on the bench. But in regards to this Supercenter compressor, so pretty much I just use that for tires. Like, yeah, I've got the male air plug there, which I just plug the line into, and then I flick the Thumper. It's a dual cylinder one. They're actually awesome for pumping up tires. But one thing I did find annoying was when that ARB one failed, and then I needed air, like I had to get someone to open that door, flick the air on, and then if, you know, the tank over time it leaks air, so every time I went to use a winch or a locker, I'd have to charge up the compressor, charge up the tank, so someone would have to go flick it on. And then one of the annoying problems with some of these cheap compressors is the pressure switch is at like 125 psi, but some of them like don't even make it to that psi in regards to the sealing surface, or something is holding back in the cylinder that it can't reach 125 psi. So it actually happened to the one in my race car, and this one's the same. What it'll do is it'll just pump up to, like, you know, might sit at 110, might get to 115, but it just sits there and runs. It doesn't actually cut out. So that was annoying. Like, yeah, the whole time you had to run it and then just turn it off, or if I was using the winch a fair bit, I'd have to leave that compressor running, and then it was as noisy as. So what I'm actually going to do is put that Thumper compressor on a switch on the dash, and then we're going to do some hot mods to it, much like I did to the race car. I was probably 12 months ago now, I can't remember. Before I raced last year, we did some hot mods to it. And I've also got one here, which isn't that old, but it failed. And what I found with the race car one, actually that one failed as well. But what I found out later on after I started digging was it was just the circuit board in there that had like corroded, and there was some soldering points that had cracked. And, you know, that houses the pressure switch and the thermal cutoff and all that rubbish. So I fixed that in the race car, and I'll put one of these solenoids in it and then put a lower pressure switch in it. So I'm going to do that to the one in my wagon as well. But I want to just diagnose this one and make sure that it's not the circuit board problem. Like, it could be, I'll pull it apart. And then if it is a circuit board problem, I'll get another one of these starter relays there, and I'll modify both of them, and then I've just like got a spare one sitting there. So there's a few hot mods here. There are a couple other things we'll do yeah, pressure switch, that starter, relay, and there's maybe a few other mods I want to try and do when I start digging, but we'll find that out when I get there. Righto, well, I've just got that out, but I think we'll get into this because this only take a minute to diagnose. If the electric motor is actually buggered, it's buggered, but if I bypass the circuit board and everything and it goes, then I'll be happy. So I'll just double check that it definitely doesn't work, and then we'll start cutting some wires. So you can see all the circuit board there, pressure switch under there, little manifold thing. Yeah, you can see the earth and the power straight through. One goes into the circuit board. You know, there's all sorts of stuff going on there. And yeah, my last one failed. You know, one of these solder points all cracked off. But pretty much all I'm going to do is just cut this wire here. I'm assuming that's the earth. Cut that wire, run that to the battery, and then run the other side of the battery and see if it turns on. You can even see that's the earth wire that went through. Half the wire's not even soldered onto the board. Like, big chunk of it's just missing. So that wouldn't help. And that's what we're left with. So yeah, earth power, and obviously this power was like a switching power, so we still need that. That will just pick up power on the inside here. And then this pressure switch, I'll unscrew it and I'll drill and tap another one. And then you could also run, you know, unscrew this hose here and drill and tap a bigger port in that manifold, and yeah, just try and increase the airflow a bit. And another thing I was thinking of is like these top caps here is where the air gets sucked in. So there's a, you know, pissant little filter, and that's the intake port there. So yeah, whether you can, like, you know, take all that off, take out this filter bit and this other filter bit, pour it out that center, and then, you know, get a bit of air filter material or something to squish in there as a solid circle, screw this back on, but then drill out the top, you know, make a nice big intake port on the top, just to try and increase flow into the compressor. All right, so I've just done a bit of a, that's not permanent obviously, just to get a bit of length. So we'll see how this goes. Oh, it wants to go. Battery is a bit flat actually. I'll go try it on my car. All right, so I just tried to go, so I'm assuming this is going to work. Just try it on the car battery. Would you look at that? Works like a dream. All right, well that's handy to know. Obviously something was wrong with this board. I did check switching power on that, like I did actually check it properly, and yeah, there's something going on with that. But that's good to know that now I've just got a spare one sitting here. But I was going to, if this actually didn't work, I was going to pull this down and pull the heads off it and that, and see if you could actually do anything on the inside of the cylinders to like increase flow or something like that. But it works, so I'm just not going to touch it. But we still have to wire it properly now, so I'll use this starter relay. I've used the exact same one. Yeah, it was probably like 10 months ago when I did it to the race car, and that thing's been running awesome since. So we'll put this on, and I'll wire it up. I've got to get a pressure switch and drill and tap and sort all that out, but I can't do that right now because I don't have my tap set. And I'll have to get another one so I can do the same to the other compressor in the car, because I'll make these two exactly the same, and then that way if something happens, I can swap them out. So that's pretty much all I'll do, is I'll screw the starter relay here. You know, the wires can reach that, the short one can reach that. Join that to that, and then wire in a pressure switch, and I'll just drill and tap the pressure switch maybe under there. I've got to see how I did on the race car. I can't remember if I could fit one under there with enough room. I've just seen it's got a 24 volt sticker on it anyway. I don't know why there's a 24 volt one. but that's not gonna work. I'll have to get a 12 volt one, so I've got to get two 12 volt ones. I have heard actually of people running these on 24 volt. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should try and run one on 24 volt and see how long it lasts. I'll have, like, people have run it for years on 24 volt, but anyway, it'd be nice to do a test back to back and see the difference with 12 and 24 volt and how long it lasts. I don't know, maybe I'll do that, but at the same time, I don't want to blow it up because, you know, it's nice having a spare. But I'll figure that out shortly. So I'll put that aside and we'll get down to pulling these ARB ones apart. So before I even pull these two old ones down, I don't know, I actually can't remember why this one failed. I've obviously had it apart, and I do know that long bolt that runs through this air manifold here, that's broken off there. I do remember that. And obviously I've had the little head off it before, but I can't actually remember. This one on the race car just stopped working, so I'm assuming it's water ingress in the electric motor. But I'll sort out this one first out of my wagon. We'll see what's wrong with it, and then I'll start ratting parts when I need. Well, there's already, obviously there's a lot of water in the air tank manifold bit, but I'll undo these caps, pull this head off and see what I can find. I might have to pull the end of the motor off this way, but we'll see in a second. Well, the cylinder's full of water. That's to be expected, obviously, with moisture. And there's the problem. Just like that, broken rod bolt. So, as long as I can get the bolt out of there, that should be an easy fix. I literally just put another bolt in as long as I can get that out and put it back together. So, hopefully that's the case. We'll find out. So I've never actually had one apart this far, but obviously all these electric motors look the same. So I'm hoping I can pull this end housing off, and maybe I can rob the end housing off one of these and just pop the housing off and then knock it back on again on this end, and then that'll give me a fresh hole to go into, and I should have a fresh bolt in one of these. So if that's the case and it goes back together good, then yeah, it's just a matter of cleaning all this stuff back up. I've got some nice O-ring grease and put it all back together, nicely greased up, ready to go and back in the car. And that's what we need. So I'll just knock that out of that bearing. Pretty simple. I'll whip this other one apart and see what we can find. Yuck. This one does not look that good. It's seized up in there. I'll try and get this bolt out. I have a feeling it's going to snap. Bit WD-40, and it's coming out pretty good. That's surprising. I thought it would have been seized in there. Well, I've run into a little bit of a problem, so I need to get this end bit and bearing off the shaft of the little motor, but there's no way to sort of, you know, knock that out or support this and knock that down, and it is pretty like seized in there. So pretty much I just knock the nut out of this housing bit, so you can see it's broken off one end. But I might see, I don't have too much stuff here at the moment to do like this sort of little nitty gritty jobs, but I might see if I can get a nut, and I'll weld a nut to that and wind out the broken bit, and then I've got the other bolt there out of this one, and I can literally just put it back together, like, and that will sort that out. I'm not going to bother putting this other one back together, just dump it in the box. Some of it's still actually salvageable, but you know, it's all right for parts. At least I know I've got it there. I don't have a vise yet. I've got all sorts going on, but I did find a nut, so I'm just going to try and fill that all with weld, hold it with the vice grips, and then undo it. Hopefully that's the plan. Feels like success, and that is a success. Back in business. Well, now it's just a matter of reversing everything. So the motor back in here, slip it back up there, flip this over, slip the rod in, you know, bolt the rod in. I'll clean it all up. I've got some O-ring grease and that. Put the head back on, put the tank back on, and then I'll go plug it in and test it, and it should work. And while I'm here, I may as well pull apart this one. This was on the race car, and this one doesn't work at all, so I'm going to assume that bearings are seized up somewhere or something along those lines. So I'll investigate that, but it won't take long to strip it down and find out. Well, that is job done. It's all back together. Went together fine, looks good. So I'll go and plug it in now, and it'll be the moment of truth. See if it works how it should. All right, if we flick this button, sounds good. No worries. Bit of air coming out, so I've got to plumb all that back up. So, so I've just sort of figured something out, and like I plumbed the compressor all back up. It sounded healthy with no load on it, but as soon as you put load on it, like when it pumps right up, it still wasn't sounding that healthy. And I think I've just figured out what's going on. So I thought I'll quickly whiz apart. It literally took like not even a minute to strip this down. So I thought I'd strip this one down that was on the back of the race car and see, you know, I was expecting it to look somewhat like this one that's probably been sitting in the shed for 10 years. That was in my old green car. I was expecting that, but I pulled it apart and it looks like brand new. You know, there's no rust or, you know, the brushes down there. Everything still looks really nice in there. So I thought, well, why did it stop? And this is why. So this is obviously the rod, and it's got a little needle bearing in the end of the rod there. And this machined up pin sits in the middle of it, like that, which bolts to the end here, like that. And that's supposed to sit on the end like that. That's offset to the center. So obviously when this spins around, you know, the piston goes up and down. So what I figured out with this is this needle bearing is locked up. Like it's just all, obviously the back sides of all the needles will be rusted, and I've just cleaned up this with a bit of Scotch-Brite. So what I've discovered is with this bolt done up, you know, if we put this spacer here, with that done up, nothing would turn. But I would just, if I just back this off, this the rod bolt, if I just back that off, like not even a quarter of a turn, you would get movement. So what it was doing was, instead of spinning the rod on that pin, it was spinning this pin spacer, it was spinning that in here. And there was actually telltale signs on that other compressor of a bit of wear from where this pin had been wearing around this aluminium housing. And I did spray some, like, I don't have any grease here, so I thought I'll just spray some WD-40 and now I freed it up a little bit. But it's still, yeah, it doesn't sound good under load. So what I'm actually gonna do is, these bearings have a name on them. The number is HK1412. I've just went online and seen you can get them for like $9 online, but I'll go down to the local bearing place and see if I can get some. I'll get 2 because all I can see is wrong with this compressor is this. So this was on the back of the race car. It was going good, and then one day, like, it just wouldn't work. So what would have happened is moisture would have got into this bearing, locked it up, and then because it sat there unused, yeah, obviously this has happened. So none of these compressors I've bought brand new. These are all second-hand compressors. So who knows what their past life was, especially that one in the wagon. It hasn't been in my wagon that long, but it's been sitting in the shed for a couple of years. It come with a front locker that I bought. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna pull that out. I'm gonna leave this strip down. I'm gonna replace this needle bearing in this one, and then replace the needle bearing in the other one. And then that should actually sound good. And then this one should work. And then I'll have 2 again. So I'll put one in the car and have 1 spare on the shelf, which is actually pretty awesome. So if you have a problem, it looks like the main problem when these stop working is this needle bearing. So if you have one on the shelf that's not working, or you know of a mate that's got one that's not working, go buy it off him for 20 bucks. I'm joking. Go tell him you can buy these needle bearings, because that seems to be the problem. Like this in the race car was on the back, it was out in the mud, out in the weather, and it all looks nice. Like even the insides of the you know, manifold there, they don't really have that much wear and tear on them, like no grime build up or anything, so it all still looks good. All right, well, I've pulled it out and I've pulled it down. The bearing seems kind of free. It's a little bit firm, but I don't know, might be enough to cause it to do what it's doing, but I'll get a new bearing for that anyway. So at the moment I need 2 bearings. I'll get a couple of them 12-volt starter relays for this Thumper compressor and the one in my car. I've got to chase up 2 pressure switches, which I've got out at mum and dad's. And I think that's it. Then we just need to piece it all back together. So I'll check in when I've got some more bits. Well, it's been a couple of weeks, but I have been tinkering away with these compressors. I've just been doing bits and pieces here and there. Nothing major, but I've had Justin here from J&E Auto Elect. He's been doing a bit to the compressors as well. So this is what we've come up with. So for starters, this is the compressor that was on the back of the race car, and it's all back together, working mint. So this is, I got 2 new bearings from the local bearing place. They were like $10 each. HK1412 is the number. And they go in the end of the rod there. And it was easy enough. I just got a socket that size and tapped it out. Like, it was not hard to do. It took like 2 seconds. And for future reference, if you undo the filter off the side like that, in this hole is, you can just see the rod, the little rod bolt in there. But you undo them 2 bolts and pull that off, and you can see in there quite easily. So that one's good to go. That'll be a spare on the shelf that I'll use if I have to. And then we go over to the one in the back of the wagon here, and that's all hooked up and good to go. So there's a bit going on in the back wiring wise. Justin's going to clean some of that up, but there's just a lot that's going on in the back there. It's sort of hard to clean everything up. The joys of running what we do on that car. All right, so we'll get on to these Thumpers. So this is what I've done to it. Nothing too major. I actually opted against, at the start I was thinking I was going to pull the heads off and do some porting work and stuff like that, but I opted against that for the time being. I might do it in the future, but for now, this is what I've done. So they're both set up the same. This one was the one that was hiding at the shed at mum and dad's that I thought was no good, but obviously, like you said earlier. So this is what we've done. We've put one of these 4-post starter relay things on it. They're good for 100, 150 amps or something like that. So that's plenty big enough. I've drilled and tapped just a normal like ARB pressure switch in there. So that's like a standard ARB pressure. So 100 off, 70 on. That's just quarter NPT thread. So I just drilled and tapped that out. And this is just a male fitting. We'll get onto the other compressor in a second. But that's just there for this setup on the other side. But that all works mint, and I'm glad that I dug this out and done this work, because now I've got a spare one of these on the shelf as well as one of these, so you know, I should be all good. And as you can see, this one looks the same, other than the pressure switch is in a different spot. But this is what I've done for the air out. So this hose here, this blue hose, this is 1/2-inch hose, and as you can see, this is a male that's the same on this one. And I've just teed off that, put the female nitto there, which will go to the hose to pump up the tyre, and then this 1/2-inch hose goes to my air tank. I've also put Anderson plugs on the power, so yeah, it can be swapped out easy enough, but you have to go these big ones because they only do this size, which is 175 amps, or they do like a 50 amp one. So and these draw 90 amps, I think they say on the side here. Yeah, 90 amps. So the 50 amp plug's no good, so we had to opt for the bigger one. At the end of the day, like, how far do you go? This is already going to be a massive improvement. It was already good, like they're good standard. They pump the tyres up pretty quick. And this is just going to make it that little bit better. But you can see this is like the tail that they come with out of the manifold there. You can see the size difference. I'll line them up. can see the size difference there. You know, like that's already a pretty, like that would be somewhat of a restriction, but obviously there's restrictions everywhere. So like in the head and that, you know, everything, there's just restrictions everywhere. And at the end of the day, it's only a little compressor, it can only pump so much air. So I think for now, we'll leave it at that. Maybe one day in the future, if I get bored, I might, you know, port one out and do some mods to one and then compare it to the other. But for now, I'll just leave them like that. And I'll show you what it looks like in the car. So that's what it all looks like said and done. You know, tucks under, obviously this is like I've got a bit of plywood that goes over the top, my fridge sits on it. So now with the air fitting on this side, I can tuck my air hose under here and it's all sort of out of the way once this top goes on. I do have to, like, obviously I'll get a bit of rubber or something to go over these positive terminals just in case. And this is, we've got a 100 amp circuit breaker in line now too, and I'll get a bit of rubber to go over that too. So that's what I mean, like it's already a massive improvement going to pump my tyres up, you know, how it's set up now, rather than going through all that, you know, just to get tyre air out of it. If I had been smart enough and thought ahead, I would have done like a test. It would have been good to see, you know, how fast it would have pumped the tyres up in comparison from then to now. But anyway, we're just gonna have to go with it's a massive improvement. So I hope this video was handy. I know it was handy for me, you know, especially the ARB stuff. You know, I've gone from having 0 compressors to now 2, which is awesome. So hopefully all that information comes in handy. If you do have one that doesn't work, don't be scared to pull it apart. The trickiest part is getting the center of the motor bit back in the brushes at the end. I use zip ties to hold the brushes back. But that's the only tricky bit. The rest of it is super easy to pull apart. So don't be scared to strip one down if you do have one sitting there that's not working. And that might save yourself buying another one, or, you know, you could have another one spare like me, and, you know, at least if something fails, you can just swap one in straight away. Either way, it's some handy information. So I'll wrap this one up here. Coming soon is, we've got more work to do to this, so keep an eye for that. I'm hopefully gonna try to take the race car out for a drive if I get a bit of time. So I'm not sure where, but that will be good. Keep an eye out for all that coming up, and we'll see you in the next one.